Sure.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this discussion with Doctor, and soon to be one more Dr. Deepak Paramashivan. Yes, you heard it right. As if one wasn't enough, he went ahead and got a second. And as if two weren't enough, he's about to get a third. And the topics couldn't have been more versatile. He was in his previous life, as he usually says, he was a climate scientist, a very well established climate scientist with a full-fledged performance career. But then he chose to come to the academic side of the social sciences and cultural studies and became an ethnomusicologist, where he did a second PhD. And then now he's starting his third PhD imminently in Western classical music. As much as it sounds to be a case of not one life is not enough, he's not very old as well. So we will try to converse as much as possible about his motivations, about his findings, about what drives him to do so much. And probably in this conversation, which will probably last for an hour and a little more, also find out what is in reserve for us through him. So Dr. Deepak, thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you. And
Thank you.
Just a piece of trivia, because my Deepak also comes from Mysore and I also come from Mysore. This is the Mysore Palace. So we are drawing on the Mysore thing right now. So let me just start by asking, do you get up every day and think of a number and say that, okay, these are the number of PhDs that I will actually stop at?
It doesn't get that worse. I get up with too many thoughts already. I get up with a cluttered mind. Jokingly, we would talk about one of our friends that as soon as he wakes up, he'll decide, okay, who should I blast today? So I'm not like that. Yeah, I'm a very normal person, like anyone.
Right. I think that will be.
I get up and brush my teeth like a good boy.
Yes, of course. I think even geniuses have to brush their teeth. However, one very interesting observation of mine when I look through your career is that you were a well-established climate scientist who also had a flourishing career as a performer. You sing, you play the harmonium, you play the sarangi. You are one of the foremost scholars of sarangi in India. You also play the sitar. You have also played the guitar. One of the stories that I will mention later about the holy trinity of Carnatic music and your foray with Western music, rock music. When all of this were stable, for the lack of a better word, why and how did you choose to shift to the academic part of music and become a social scientist in essence by delving into ethnomusicography?
Becoming a social scientist to me did not mean that I'm going away from performance. So it was actually an opportunity for me to become a full-time performer, because when I started my second PhD, the topic that I had in my mind was the sarangi. I mean, it all happened when I was touring USA in 2012. I was traveling from Chicago to Iowa with a world-renowned mathematician. So there was a concert in Iowa. I had just finished a concert in Chicago, and I was sitting next to the sarangi at the back, and I looked at sarangi and I thought, okay, this thing has given me so much love, so much. It has given me name and fame, and I think I should do this in all sincerity, and I should contribute to not only the performative aspect but also the scholarship aspect of it. So that is when I decided to do another PhD about one of my sarangi gurus, which due to various reasons did not happen. I mean, it was providential that I ended up writing about my father. So I have never been divorced from performance. I have always been a performer. Even when I went to Canada for my second PhD, I was in the music department. So the performance went without saying. So you
That
should be
being
surprised that I wrote a thesis. That's it. I mean that was the only additional component.
exactly. It's the academic bend to your to the side, the artistic side that you already have. Where did that come from? Because you know, writing a PhD in a pure science subject like climate science is probably not the same as writing a detailed analysis of the of Kannada theatre, as you went on to sort of do that. Um, it is, I mean, obviously, performance is a central aspect to it, and you being a performer help you understand the nuances of the performance. But the scholarship of it is a completely different lingo. It's a different world altogether. Did you face any challenges while transitioning, or were you already involved in scholarship of the social sciences when you were a scientist already?
I was not familiar with the scholarship of social science at all. It was quite a challenge for me to begin with. I was not familiar with the vocabulary. You know, as engineers, we are trained to think uh, parsimoniously. That's the
Mm,
word. So
mm,
in mathematics, every definition is parsimonious. Every idea is defined parsimoniously. Whereas in social science, I'm sorry for saying this, it might actually raise the eyebrows of a lot of social scientists. Sometimes uh, I don't want to I don't want to say we, social scientists take recourse to language. I mean, it gives you an impression that they're trying to obfuscate. I don't know if I should say, if I should use the word obfuscate, but yeah, I was not familiar with the
mm,
vocabulary,
mm,
and I wrote my very first proposal like an engineer. I mean,
mm,
it's A implies B. It's as simple as that.
mm,
But it did not go well with the committee, who were all. I mean, at least one of them was an Indic scholar.
mhm,
So, so all that you said, that I wrote about the Indian theater and all that. It's so that the entire thesis was written in the second half of my PhD, and the first half of my PhD, I still thought like an engineer. Then it was thrown as a challenge to me whether can you think like a social scientist, and the transition was not very difficult. The transition the other way around would be difficult, but
mm,
for someone who is trained in doing research in science, that's the advantage of doing research in science. You can get to the core of a topic in a heartbeat.
mm,
So
mm.
it was not a challenge, I would say. It took time, of course, because it was a new thing to me.
Right. I also observed now that you actually said social scientist in third person singular, as if trying to detach yourself from that. You don't want to fall in that subset at all. But a natural question would be: would you also say those climate scientists? Would you also be detached from that part of your previous life?
uh, there's a nice expansion for PhD which I often quote. It's called the permanent head damage. So once you do your PhD, your head is permanently damaged, and even though you want to disown yourself as a climate scientist, the community doesn't.
Mm,
So I still continue to be a climate scientist. I do collaborate with people. So I have my colleagues with whom I'm still collaborating. So once a climate scientist, always a climate scientist. And similarly, once a social scientist, always a social scientist. I mean, doing social science helped me to understand the politics, polemics, and problematization of art,
mm,
especially the the art that is not Western,
mm,
the
mm,
ethnic, the esoteric, or what's the word for it? Uh, Ethnic is the word. Yeah.
mm. I see. And while I was going through some parts of your dissertation, which is available at Google Scholar, I see that, I mean, of course, it was difficult for me to get into that groove of understanding social science research because I also come from a scientific background. Uh, it didn't seem like the work of a first time social scientist. You seem to have adapted to the lingo, to the parlance, if you may, of that world very quickly. And it's a fabulous work. It tells a lot about not only the society at that time, but also the practitioners, and it contextualizes the art in the time that it was practiced.
Uh, I don't know. Uh, my professor said the same. So after reading my second draft of the thesis, that's what my professor said. I don't know how you are able to do it in such a short time. I think uh, I can adapt very easily. That's something that I have. Uh, it's I always say that I'm a cheap clone of my father. So all my father's contemporaries say that he was like water. He could take any shape as a musician. I think I have imbibed those qualities from him, and I'm able to adapt in
Mm.
any academic setting, be it something that is as hardcore as climate engineering, climate sciences, or it could be something like social sciences. Yeah, it happened quickly. I mean, I was lucky.
Well, that is something that everyone says they got lucky, but there is obviously more to that than that. Um, I also want to know how did the second PhD begin? What was the context in which you were able to convince your professors that, look, this is a topic that, of course, back then it would have been the Sarangi, and we will get to that point where you shifted, and the conversation that you had with your professors after you presented a symposium on your father's work, where the shift actually happened, and they themselves came and said that, why don't you do this, because this is a treasure trove. But to get to the point where they were convinced of your ability, how did that happen? Where what were the things that they saw, if I may?
So I was after my PhD. I was loitering around like a vagabond. I was in Italy. I was in South Korea. I think, and I was in the US touring both as a climate scientist, giving my research symposia, and also as a performer. Then when I was in Seoul, South Korea, my professor made this offer to me that there is a lab in Alberta, at the University of Alberta in Edmonton. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, sure. Again, the I always had hidden agenda. So whenever I chose a place, I would always look for whether there is music, uh, that there's a vibrant musical culture there. So when I chose Canada, I thought my one of my guru's daughter, who's a sarangi player, lives in Canada. I thought, oh, good, I can go learn from her. And the very reason why I chose IIT Bombay was the same, because I wanted to be close to my sarangi guru. So when this offer was made, it was too hard for me to resist. I said, okay, why not? But only after going there, I realized that the place where I live is 4 hours now by flight from where she lives, and the flight tickets are prohibitively expensive, and I could only visit her twice. So during I was working as a postdoctoral fellow scientist. I won the Yenserk fellowship. Is one of the most prestigious fellowships. Yenserk postdoctoral fellowship as a climate scientist, and I was working at the University of Alberta, and I got an opportunity to present uh, Indian classical music. So to the students of music department, they wanted an introductory Indian classical music lecture. So then I went with my instrument, and to my utter surprise, Professor Regular Qureshi, who is one of the authorities on Sarangi. I mean, who was, I think, who popularized Sarangi in the West as a scholar. So she was a professor in the same department, and she was extremely delighted, and she was very happy to hear me speak and play my instrument and share my experience, and we got very close. At the same time, I met this wonderful human, Professor Michael Frischkoff. When meeting him changed my life. uh, so both of them were very happy, and when I floated this idea that I want to do a PhD in ethnomusicology, back then I didn't know what ethnomusicology actually meant. I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity for me to write about my Sarangi guru, who's one of the pioneers, and who without whom Sarangi would not be what it is today. So he single-handedly elevated the status of Sarangi from a mere accompaniment instrument to a solo instrument, and he did it how? Uh, he toured across the world. He went to Europe. He spent most of his time in Europe, hobnobbing with the greats like Yehudi Menuhin. I mean, Yehudi Menuhin spoke very high of him. So I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to write about him, to document his work, and at the same time learn from him. I may have to say a lot of things to put things in perspective. I mean, I don't know if I should say this or not. Okay, let me not let me not talk about it, because there are some sensitive issues. But anyways, one of the reasons was that I could document his work, and I have spoken about it briefly in my thesis.
Yes.
If you really are interested, anybody is interested, you can just go through it. Why I chose to do another PhD. I already had a PhD. Doing one PhD itself it requires a tremendous amount of craziness, and to do another one, you have to be insane. That's what people say, and now they will stop giving me any labels, because now I'm going for the third. They can't even call me insane. Anyways, so that was one of the main reasons that I chose to do another PhD, and I had prepared everything. I had made a nice. The path was clear. The chapter schemata was ready, but things changed for bad, and from bad it went to worse. So I mean, these are the challenges that you would actually face, especially as a scholar doing research. Uh, I mean, these challenges are faced by scholars who are doing research on someone else's culture, but I had to face these challenges being an Indian. Then I realized that it is actually more challenging for an Indian to do research on Indian musicians than people from outside India. So they are rolled a red carpet welcome, whereas you, as an Indian, you are treated with, uh, if I may say so, contempt, suspicion, and whatnot. I mean, not just musicians about whom I was about to write, even the musicians who I approached for interviews to talk about this great man, the Sarangi player. They did not give me a very positive response. I mean, some of them were very kind, no doubt, and it actually helped me build a wonderful friendship. Ustad Ashish Khan Saab was one of them, and Pandit Anindo Chatterjee. They were very kind, and some of them were very kind. Some of them were uh, not so kind. Uh, yeah, so it was. I think in my second year, there, there was a tradition of Thursday symposiums in the music department, and out of nowhere, they were writing running short of topics, or somebody had to drop out on that particular week. Then I just volunteered myself. I said, I want to talk about this wonderful tradition. Incidentally, my father was in the US then. My second niece was just born, so I was visiting him. And when I heard that here is an opportunity, I took all the information from my father. That was the very first formal interview that I did of him.
Mhm.
And so he gave me. I mean, he had all the information. He was a walking encyclopedia, university, whatever you want to call it. So he just spoke for about half an hour, and I collected all the information. And having grown up uh, in a household where It reminds me of a very nice anecdote in Shankara Digvijaya. When Shankaracharya goes to Mahishmati to debate Mandana Mishra, he asks for the address, and the women folk who are near the river, they say, okay, if you go to this so and so street, in front of the house there is a cage, and in within the cage there are two parrots that are discussing whether Brahma is real or unreal, whether is it through karma that you get moksha or is it through jnana. When you hear this kind of a conversation from the parrots, that is Mandana Mishra's house. That is the indication. So I grew up like a parrot, not in a cage, a free parrot though, but grew up to conversations about music all the time. It was all the time about theater, and all the eminent theater personalities used to visit our house, and so it was very easy for me to assimilate whatever he was saying, and so I made this presentation. Uh, not only the professors of music department, but also the professors from drama department were there. I'm one of my clown gurus, acting gurus, Professor Michael Kennard. He was there in the audience, and he was so excited. He That was when I was learning physical comedy and clowning from him, and there was a concept called the dual clown, the solo clowning and dual clowning. I was learning dual clowning from him, and while I was making the presentation, he said, "Hey, dude, do you realize that this is dual clowning?" Pointing to my aunt's performance. And when I realized that, the man who's responsible for all this, and he has this whole institution, this the knowledge world of Kannada theater in him, and he's my father, and here I am paying money to relearn. I mean, I don't have regrets. I learned it from the best of the people, but still, then my professor, who knew that things were not going very smooth with my field study about my previous topic about Sarangi, he said, "I think you are wasting time. You are not getting any information from the subject. Uh, why don't you reconsider your topic?" I said, "What do you want me to write about?" I mean, fortunately, my father had trained me so well that I had no dearth of topics. I mean, which is what I even told one of the friends of that Sarangi player. Uh, Thankfully, so much music runs in me that I can churn theses like this. I mean, I was casting my modesty aside. I said I was very rude. I said I can churn theses. I don't need anybody's help. And so he said, why do you want to write about any other topic? Why don't you write about your father? Said that's not a bad idea. Then I asked my father, will he be okay with it? And he said, I have no problems. Yeah, so and that's how it all started.
That's wonderful. And I want to harp back to your caged parrot analogy. I think the story was indicative of how smart even caged parrots were in Vandana Mishra's home, because they were learning from the conversation between Vandana Mishra and probably his wife, who's also a scholar. But it reminds me of the storyline that I picked from your thesis about how your parents were really insistent that you get a formal education, right? And how you were beaten black and blue. I'm quoting you directly for for enacting a part of a play when in front of your father, was it? And
He was not around. I enacted in front of the other
yeah.
folks.
So that was perhaps because I would quote in Kannada, "Natakadavana tara agbeda." Don't become a drama man because your father he carried regrets of not having had a formal education, right? So in that kind of a context, you may not have been a caged parrot. You are not a parrot, first of all, but there were some hindrances, so to say, in exercising your agency as a child, obviously. Can you tell us a little more about that?
I think his own personal experience being a theater artist had hardened him like that, and
Mhm.
I mean, it's not just about him. A lot of I see this particularly in the southern part of India, not so much in the Hindustani music circles. In Hindustani music, uh, every Hindustani musician wants his son or daughter to be another musician.
Mm.
Whereas in Carnatic, mostly, I mean, 9 out of 10 cases, they want you to get a formal education. I mean, even Bal Murali's son, he became an engineer, I was told. Uh, the great Palagat Mani Iyer's son is an engineer. So I think it was resonating with what was prevalent in those days. Probably they would have seen so much hardship. I mean, even my father, for that matter, until the year 2002, uh, he was very well known. Everybody respected him, but still, he did not get the credit that was due. In the year 2002 or 2003, he got his national award, and then things changed tremendously. In Sarasra, it was like a miracle, like a switcheroo trick of a big what's that character, Bugs Bunny switcheroo trick. So it changed the entire world, and you have within a short span of time. I mean, you'd be, I don't know if I can show this. Within a short span of time, the whole of this. Let me.
Sure.
Oh, I think I can't do this. Let me show. Let me try. So this whole rack was filled with awards and mementos, and the whole house.
Wow.
And we had to get rid of a lot of them. We had to throw them away, give it away to people within a very short span of time. I mean, just one award was enough. So probably he had waited too long to get where he got, even though it was the same person, it was the same. I mean, he did not acquire all the knowledge overnight, obviously. Uh, so probably he was very concerned about our future. So both him and my mother, being an academician, she said nothing doing. I mean, it's very interesting. So they did not mind me learning music, but they did not want me to take it as a profession. My father taught me theater music. He taught me those cute little songs, and I would he would sometimes teach me a song and make me sing them, sing some of the songs in when other theater personalities visited us. The very invocatory song in Master Hiranya's company was one of the first songs that he taught me in the glory of Lord Narsimha. And there were songs that my aunt, my late aunt Nagaratama, who used to play roles of Kamsa and Bhima, she used to sing. So he would teach me those songs, and I would sing them in front of her to impress her, and she would be very happy. So I mean, this happened, but to take theater as a profession, it was a strict no. So I think it was made clear to me from day one that yeah, you have to do your engineering.
Right. I think it also comes from the fact that you also write about it. The childhood that your father had, it was very tumultuous. It was very tragic as well. And I think our audience can understand when you say that suddenly in 2002 he became an overnight success or a genius. You also put that picture with Kalam Sahab and the Vice President Bhairon Singh Shekhawat, where he's winning this Sangeet Natak Academy Award. In that sort of a context, would it be fair to say that because of the upbringing that he had, you were forced not to choose performance as your primary stream of breadwinning, if I may, because your parents were probably biased against the fact that this was not a good enough avenue to make a living. However, that begs a bigger question. Why is it that art and artists are not given the space in the society that they deserve, number one? And number two, I mean strictly financially, of course they are revered and they're highly respected. And number two is that there is also some sort of selectivism, right? A very famous Carnatic or a Hindustani singer or instrumentalist is at a higher pedestal than, say, probably someone who does a drama, a Kannada theater. It is also within music like Odisha has its own classical musical tradition, but not many people are aware of it. And even there, it is a struggle for fame and recognition and things like that. So, of course, there are stratifications in society in general as to who makes money and things like that. But within the artistic repertoire, why are there these hierarchies, if you may? I'm using a highly social scientist lingo because I've been drenched in your work in the past week. So
It's hard to say. Uh, not just between different musical strata. I mean, you see it even among the North Indian and the South Indian classical music. So leave alone the lighter forms of music. I don't want to use the word light. Leave alone other forms of music. Even strictly within the confines of the classical music systems, uh, Hindustani musicians are paid more than Carnatic musicians. I mean, it's quite surprising.
mhm.
I don't know. I don't know the reason. One needs to really study, and it's hard to say.
Right. And that doesn't speak about either the complexity in the art form or its reach, because if your example that you just said about Hindustani versus Carnatic, the same Hindustani musician, if he or she were to perform in a place like Mandya or Tumkur or Coimbatore for that matter, would probably not invite as many eyeballs as perhaps someone who's not as famous but a Carnatic musician playing at the same sort of place. And therefore, of course, as you said, it's a hard question to answer. But is there any dependence on institutionalization of these musical tradition or this artistic tradition? You write a lot about nationalization of music in the early periods of our independence and attaining the national conscience, so to say, that some artistic traditions were preferred over the other for the classicalization project. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Uh, I wanted to answer these questions at a later point in time of my life.
Okay.
So
Have I
I
preempted
will.
another PhD?
Not really. Mm, I will try to keep it simple for now because then it actually it opens a can of worms. It's a Pandora's box or whatever. So okay, I'll answer with the help of uh, again. It's a sukta in the Vedic literature. It's called the Kamo Karshi, then Manyu Sukta. So there's a lot of people do chant it. It's called the Kamo Karshi Japa, in which it says Kamo Karshi Kama Karoti Nahang Karomi Nahang Karta Kamang Karita Yeshde Kama Kama Yaswaha. The same way Manyu Karshit Manyu Karoti Nahang Karomi Nahang Karta Manyu Karita Nahang Karita. So these suktas, I mean, these two particular suktas, it's nothing but the apotheosis of desire and anger. So you're deifying desire and anger, and you're blaming it all on them. So all your actions on them. So see, kamakarita, nahankarita. See, I'm not the doer of the action. It is my desire which is motivating me to do this. In the same way, I'm not the doer. It is my manu, which is the anger, which is, I'm giving you the more superficial translation. So it's my anger which is making me do this. So yeah, through which you are, and at the end, you pray to these gods of anger and gods of desire to motivate you to do the right thing, so that you don't get controlled by them and end up doing untoward things. So in the same way, I'll answer for now by saying whatever I have written about nationalization, the canonization, the classicization, it is all because of what the scholarship demanded of me.
Mm.
So it's what, that's how scholarship is, that is the accepted scholarship.
Mm.
So I wrote it because the scholarship demanded it. I mean, there are many things that I don't know if I should say this. I At least I can say this at least. So there are many things that I may actually not mean. So which is why I have made it. I have actually cleverly said it in a way. Sometimes, I mean, if you can really read between the lines, there are many instances where I steer clear, off of any. As I said, the polemics, the politics, and the problematization. I I wanted to stay away from all these, but little did I know that when I signed up for a PhD in ethnomusicology, I mean, this is what is meant by scholarship. I mean, you can't look at music, in an isolated setting. When you're talking about music of another culture, you have to talk about, I mean, all these notions, the notion of classicization, the notion of feminism, gender, caste. I mean, these are all the favorite topics, the hot topics in scholarship, and you can't just do away with these.
Mm.
I've given a chance, I would have definitely done a purely theoretical, a prescriptive, what's the word for it? Just analyzing the repertoire. I would have loved to do such a work, but nobody is interested in, in 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 such a purely theoretical work. I mean, now theory actually means scholarship. So nobody want no. I mean, it's understandable. Why would anybody want to know about Indian theater? Someone sitting in the US.
Mm.
So unless someone is really curious, so the curiosity of most of these scholars, particularly those who are studying Indic arts or Indic science, or Indic literature, so it stems from the fact that they are interested in the social. The social and political milieu in which the art or literature reinvented itself. It's called the cultural reclamation. I'm using the social science language. I mean, avoiding all the jargon, but yeah. So it's a process of cultural reclamation,
Mm.
and in which the art reinvents itself under given social and political circumstances. So that is what people are interested in. I mean, that's what the scholars are interested in. You are called a scholar only when you write about this. So it's actually very funny. Just to tell you, give you an example. Someone, suppose you have a grammarian uh, who spent all his life studying Panini and Aindra, Chandra, other Vyakaranas, and cover to cover, and taught thousands of students in Pathshala, and was a celebrated grammarian in India. And you have someone coming from outside India. He comes here, spends a couple of months, let's say 3 months, and he goes back and writes about this grammarian who has spent all his life studying Sanskrit grammar. He refers to him as an informant, and he becomes a scholar because he is someone as an outsider able to critique and look at it through the social cultural lens and comment about it. So nobody is interested in the grammar per se.
Mm.
Scholars are interested in what how grammar evolved, and what were the social circumstances or political circumstances under which grammar evolved. I mean, same thing applies to music or art or any literature for that matter. So, so what I did was I did what I did because the scholarship, the so-called scholarship, demanded me to do that. So there are many things. I mean, I can confess that there are many things that I may actually really not mean. Whenever I don't mean something, I have cleverly taken the neutral path. It would be a very strong statement to say that it's. music came to the fore, and the music was uprooted from the traditional performers, and it came to the city centers through the route of Sanskrit. It's very interesting, how many musicians know Sanskrit? How many musicians have studied these treatises? How many musicians, how many performing big musician has studied Sangeeta Ratnakara or Pandarika Mala, for that matter, Sadraga Chandrodaya, or how many of them have studied Sangeeta Sara, Sangeeta Sudhakara? No. So, I mean, it opens up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Pandora's
I'll stop
box.
it.
Yes.
I'll
I
stop
understand, because the performative aspect of scholarship is perhaps not something that would interest Western scholars. And this is a complaint, okay, for the lack of a better word, a complaint that I've heard from social scientists who work in the actual social milieu, trying to understand current events and happenings from the political lens. But apparently even there is an entry barrier, because your lens is supposed to be tilted, and heterodoxy of thought is not all that welcome. I'm surprised that something of this nature also happens in the performing arts, because at least to my naive eyes, performing arts is as objective as a
Oh,
mathematical.
not at all. Oh, not at all. Please.
Okay. Okay. So obviously, the qualification of my eyes being naive is apparently correct. Okay. So we will take this a little further. Of course, I will not ask you to open the Pandora's box, but there is something that you have remarked in the beginning parts of your theses, and you said, and I quote, "I will discuss in detail the complexity of the melody, rhythm, and lyrics, and conclude," this is important, that the extremely challenging repertoire might have been a chief cause of the decline of this theater tradition."
True.
And as and when you read ahead, and I was also fortunate enough to witness Subhadra Kalyana, the review of which you have also kindly added to your thesis. I want to know from you, how is the Kannada theatre form declining, the traditional theatre form declining, because of the complexity, where now we see more interest in Carnatic classical music, more interest in understanding the nuances of the lyrics, or the tala system, or the raga system, in at least people of my generation. And how is Kannada theatre that you define here different from the Kannada theatre that currently exists, where probably current issues are being discussed in the language Kannada, but may not be of the operatic traditional theme, where there is the music plays a central part in its performance?
Yeah, when I said Kannada theatre, I was referring to the operatic Kannada theatre, which because the literature was composed by the court poets of Mysore, and music was composed by the court musicians, who borrowed profusely from Tyagaraja's compositions and all the traditional compositions like Javali, Tilana, and Kshetrajna, Pada, and so on. So, I mean, given a choice, I don't know if I should say this. People tend to become lazy. I think it's some kind of conditioning that theater people and actors, or even to an extent intellectuals and musicians, especially in the cinema music, they gave an impression that classical music is hard, and your mind is conditioned, and you're already, there is a fear psychosis that classical music is hard, so it is not for you, and I'm giving you something that is easy to understand, easy to appreciate, and easy to internalize. And they did this, I think, for over a period of time, with which it became people came to a conclusion that yes, classical music is hard, and since the Kannada theatre, operatic Kannada theatre, is based on classical music. This must be hard. So why do this? I mean, why do you have to sing? So there were, with all due respect, Shivaram Karant. I mean, he had such contempt. He used to spew venom against this operatic Kannada theatre. He said, why do you have to put on all the makeup and sing? I mean, I would say, why not? So there was a general uh, uh, understanding that was created. People were conditioned to think that classical music is hard and classical theater is hard. So you don't have to sing to become an actor, or you don't have to learn classical music to be a singer. You don't have to. So it's like you don't have to know maths to do research. You don't have to know engineering to do. So it's, I think there is a reason. I read an article that there is a new movement uh, that a lot of people feel that imposing math education on kids creates some kind of
Yeah, I read that.
hierarchy.
Yeah.
It's you can just draw parallels here. So learning classical music is hard. So learn what? So
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. Now, let's go a little deeper into the classical musical tradition in Rama itself. And you refer to something called Ranga Panchamrita many times. Can you please tell us what Ranga Panchamrita is and how it is so closely interwoven with the repertoire of the operatic Kannada theatre that you mentioned earlier?
So it's a concoction of 5 nectars, divine nectars, Ranga Panchamrita. So here, these Panchamritas are the musical nectars. We must be eternally grateful and thankful to the kings of Mysore who were visionaries. So I think I'll take this opportunity to dispel the misconception that the Kannada theatre was influenced by Marathi theatre. No, I'm sorry. It's the other way around. So it was the uh, nomadic Kannada theatre that visited the king of Sangli, and he was so impressed with his music that he asked his court poets to compose musical theatre in Marathi. And also another common, I think people take pride. Oh, this came from Persian theatre. I mean, Persian theatre is not a theatre that came from Persia. It was the Parsi local Mumbai Parsi community that was enacting plays based on Ramayana and Mahabharata. Okay, so it's very funny when people say that the Farsi theater influenced. No, it was not influenced by Farsi theater or by Marathi theater. It was the other way around. So the king of Mysore was such a great visionary that he had musicians from across the globe visiting his court. And whenever there was a visiting musician, he made sure that the local court musicians learn from him, learn his repertoire, the local repertoire. The when Ustad Vilayat Hussain Khan Sahab of the great Agra Gharana visited, uh, actually Ustad Fayaz Khan apparently visited the court of Mysore, and Maharaja made him an offer that, why don't you be my court musician? He said, I'm sorry, I have too many concerts in northern part of India. I can't. So he was probably making more money performing in as a performer than as a court musician. He said, so I can't be here, but I'll send a wonderful musician to you. And it was Ustad Vilayat Hussain Khan Sahab who came. And when Ustad Vilayat Hussain Khan was visiting Mysore, the Maharaja of Mysore made sure that the musicians learn the Hindustani classical compositions. So when these musicians got together and composed music for theater, no wonder it became a concoction of 5 nectars. Every composition is either a Tyagaraja Kriti or a Kshetrajna Pada. I mean, I can give uh, a whole lecture demonstration of how music was borrowed. I mean, for example, "Ide Kopa Manohare," there is a song. "Parakela Saraswati." This is a composition, a very famous composition. Manasu Vishaya Nata. a very famous composition in Natakuranji. The same composition, you have the Kannada lyrics. Sogasu biru adido bage bage huvugalo. And Hindustani compositions, scores of them. Uh, the famous one. जन को जनी ಮುದವೇದಿನ ಮುದವೇದಿನ ಆರೋಹಿಣಿ ಶನುಲಿವದಿನ ಒಲಿದು ಮನ ನನದನ ಮುದವೇದಿನ ಮುದವೇದಿನ. So jazz, you have this whole literature on the one hand, and you have this rarest of the rare compositions that were borrowed and lyrics changed, and there were also original tunes, number of them. And Maharaja was himself a saxophone player and a pianist, so he used to interact with musicians from composers from Russia, and
Yeah.
he went on a tour to better his piano skills to Europe. So he invited musicians from there, and there are waltzes and whatnot.
Yes. Can I
So
ask you to put in context the Shostakovich jazz suite, which you've indicated that was used in one of the
yeah, so
dramas.
it was uh, I think it was in the play Tukaram or Kabirdas. When his son dies, his wife sings this. ಸೋನುವೆ ನಿನ್ನ ಕಾಣದೆ ನಾನು ಬಾಳುವೆ ನಿಲ್ತೋ ನಾ ಸಹಿಸಲಾರೆ ಈ ಶೋಕವ. I mean, these
Wow.
are geniuses.
Yes,
So,
indeed. And of course, you also talk about Nacho Aise Cheez Buri Hai from the 1957 movie, I think.
Oh, that was not used in a drama, but my father was he was a again a repetitive walking encyclopedia of old Bollywood songs.
Mm-hmm.
So he had actually revolutionized the scoring, background scoring of Kannada theatre. So he used to occasionally drop some nice tunes, especially in the social dramas, not in the classical dramas, in the dramas based on the Puranic themes. So one of them was it's a famous scene in a play called Sadarame, where it's an act of robbery. A very funny scene. So my father, when I was accompanying him for one of the shows, and then that is when actually I decided, I should do this play under his direction, particularly for that piece of music. मुंह से मत लगा चीज है बुरी, बात मत बढ़ा चीज है बुरी, छोड़ दे ये मैं कशी मेरे हमनशी मेरे हमनशी. The beautiful song by Opi Nair. So
Yes.
he played this, and I asked him, what is this tune all about? And he said, "Oh, it's an old Hindi song."
Right. So we see here that Kannada theatre, partly because of the patronization by the Vadiyars, saw a very rich culture of getting inspired by, if you would want to call it that way, Western classical music, like jazz, and Bollywood, as well as the regular old Tyagarajas, Muthuswami
Bollywood
Dikshitas.
did not happen during the Warriors' time. It's a recent addition.
Right.
It happened after 60s, I would say.
Okay.
Just to make it more interesting, because by then film was already picking up. Back then there was no cinema, so this was the only source of entertainment. And I'm sure, just to expatiate upon what we were discussing, I mean, sorry for digressing.
No, sure.
We spoke about whether classical music is difficult. I'm sure you attended Subhadra Kalyana. All the songs were purely classical, And when I delivered some of those Kandapadyas, people enjoyed it, and there were, big round of applause and once more that we heard. Not everyone was trained in Carnatic music, but they were still able to appreciate it. So I think we are creating this misconception that if you do, Carnatic music is for elite, or if I may even say, for Brahminical music. I mean, it is not. I'm sorry. Dattila, one of the greatest scholars of music, Dattila was not a Brahmin. Bharata was not a Brahmin. I mean, we don't have evidence to prove that he is Brahmin. Matanga definitely was not a Brahmin, who wrote one of the biggest treatises on Carnatic music, the Brihad Deshi. He was not a Brahmin. And so I think, I mean, I'm sure the audience, I wonder how many of them really knew classical music, but still they appreciated it. I mean, all this culture, I think, started because of the cinema. I mean, it is to be solely blamed. In Tamil, one of my favorite music directors, you know who I'm talking about. So he in one of his movies,
it is definitely not Rahman.
No, don't put me in trouble.
No, sorry.
I like Rahman, so I work for him, so you know that.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah. So, but I mean, he's one of my favorite music directors I'm talking about. So, this man in the famous movie, I can say that in Sindhu Bhairavi. You don't need to know classical music to appreciate this. Then you have Padari and Padipari and Pallikudam Naname. I think this culture to show that this is elite or this is exclusive. I think it's the politicization of music that was chiefly responsible for the decline.
Right. However, there is one string that I would want to pull here. You talk about how the drama companies back then would hire only Brahmins or Lingayats back in time because their ucharana, their pronunciation were of the kind that the drama company would require on a stage. And you give one example in your thesis. You say halu anna and not alu hanna. And then at another, I think it was another interview of yours where you were talking to All India Radio or something, said akki hakkiyannu kachikondo ari hoitu. Yeah. So, but there was an entry barrier there in the drama profession for people to enter. They apparently had to have good pronunciation. I'm sure that non-Brahmins and non-Lingayats have amazing Kannada pronunciation, but there was, for the lack of a better word, discrimination there. And would it be right to say that is the historical entry barrier that even Carnatic musicians are facing right now? Is that something that you would agree with? It is not my hypothesis. You know that very well. It is not my hypothesis. So I'm just asking you if that is something that you would.
I mean, I think we need to. It's a wonderful question. So, how do I put it? So the pronunciation doesn't come from Brahminism. Brahminism comes from pronunciation. Let me put it that way. Okay, or Brahminism, or whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. So when I wrote that usually Brahmins and Lingayats were accepted to theater because their pronunciation was good, it doesn't mean that people who were non-Brahmins and non-Lingayats had no opportunity. No. So there were a lot. In fact, the most famous, I think, Krishna role was played by I forgot his name, Chikkarame Gowda, and another guy. And there was another guy from who was from the lower strata of the society. So it was the other way around. I mean, if your pronunciation is good, you were accepted, and if your pronunciation was not so good, then no. I mean, even before the pronunciation, here the first barrier was the musical training. As far as Kannada theater is concerned, without musical training, there was no entry, and there is a reason for it. Because the Kannada theater, even though it was formed by the Wadayar, the people who were a part of the theater were all In the very first generation, it was the court musicians. It was all played by Vineshesh and Vasudevacharya and Bidaram Krishnappa. Bidaram Krishnappa was not a Brahmin. So he was one of the pioneers who actually started the Kannada theatre tradition. So I think I lost the track. What was I saying?
You're talking about language being the
musical
source.
Training. Yeah. So, and the second generation of actors were not court musicians, but musicians who had failed to make it big in the classical music scene. So we usually joke about in the scientific community. I mean, those who are failures as mathematicians, they become computer scientists. It's a joke. There are phenomenal mathematicians, but we usually joke amongst our friends. So it was like that. I mean, those who could not make it big in the classical music field, even though they were very well trained musicians. One of them was Malavalli Sundaramma. Her father was, I mean, both of them were not Brahmins. I think they belonged to the courtesan class. But all the court musicians used to go to him for advice on the prayoga of Riti Gaula. My father used to remember. Mysore Vasudevacharya used to ask him, Rajanna, I think his name was, ಏನೋ ಇದು ರೀತಿ ಗೌಡದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದೊಂದು ಪ್ರಯೋಗ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲೋ, ಇದು ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾ? So he used to ask his opinion. He wanted his stamp. So music training was definitely a part of it because it was operatic. And pronunciation, yes, definitely yes. I mean, only if your pronunciation is good. My father also used to joke about one of the actors who was, it seems, a phenomenal actor, but his pronunciation was so horrible that he would be acting very much into the role, playing the role of Ravana. ನಾನು ವೈದೇಹಿಯನ್ನು ಮುಟ್ಟಿದರೆ ನನ್ನ ತಲೆಯು 1000 ಓಳಾಗಲಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದ ಅವನು. So, may my head burst into smithereens, 1,000 smithereens. But it's the word holu. So yes. I mean, people used to make fun of it. So it's quite natural, So I think they were playing it safe. So people used to make fun of him. It seems he's such a wonderful actor, but avana olu. So 1000 olu Ravana. He was called the 1000 olu Ravana.
Yeah, right. So, but does that continue now? Is there a stratification, so to say, while learning?
Now there is no theater, so we don't even have to worry about.
I'm talking about Carnatic music, and even Hindustani music for that matter.
No. Even come on, what are we talking about? Hindustani. How many Brahmins are there in Hindustani music?
No. See, which is why it is, and I think this is something that we have spoken about quite a lot in the past. The idea that one has to pass their musical legacy only through their children and be suspicious or be always questioning of the intentions of someone who's not from their family. Sorry?
Yeah, who is an outsider.
Exactly.
Like me.
Indeed. And which is there are a few threads that are coming to my head right now. One of them is you clearly spoke about your how objective would you be talking about your own father in the thesis to describe Kannada theatre, while you being so linked with your father. So his biography is as much as about Kannada theatre as it is your autobiography, right? So the question again comes back. I mean, not to linger too much. The entry barrier may also be of the caste and strata related, which is, of course, as you said, it is not entirely true. But is there also a blood strata?
That is very much prominent in the Hindustani music, but not so much in Carnatic. Very few cases where father passed on his knowledge only to his son. That was not true. At least none of the Mysore musicians, and most of them did not have sons or daughters. One might argue that which is why they were teaching people from outside, but when we can get into that, but it's not true. I mean, my guru D Balakrishna ji. I mean, he's
Yeah.
such a sincere teacher. He
Yeah.
has taught everybody without any discrimination.
Okay, so let's kind of move on, and I want to ask you this. You have written this, and it's a very quotable line. You say that when the art is contemporary, the artist and the historical circumstances are both dispensable, right? Can you please tell us a little more about this? When you say
I
that
was
circumstances are dispensable, aren't we in a situation where we are supposing what the societal milieu would have been back then? This is probably also the circumstance that you faced when you were writing about your father's journey and Kannada theatre in general. And correct me if I'm wrong, we have a tradition of Shruti and Smriti, but of writing things down and documentation and recording things is not very prominent, at least in our culture. That's a gross generalization, but generally this is true. So when you say that the art is when the art is contemporary, the artist and the historical circumstances are dispensable, do you mean that we have to get we shouldn't bother with recording stuff, or do you mean to say that the art has to be the center and not the milieu at that for the artist who's contemporary?
I think that's what I meant. You don't have to read too much into it. It was written in a particular context. Uh, let us assume. So we are talking about musicians who are alive and kicking. So when you are talking about their music, you really don't have to worry about the history as much as the historical records as much. So you have this living example, you have this person in flesh and blood, and you can get all the information from him through his performances and through his by interacting with him, or with his interaction with the society and how the society views him. So this kind of archiving would become necessary only to preserve it to the posterity. So that was what I was hinting at.
Okay, understand. Now, we have spoken for about an hour and a little more, and I want to keep continuing because I want to ask you so many questions. And I was very conscious to not make this about your thesis and your what you've written in your second PhD, because I also want to talk about you and your upcoming works and what else. So, just for the audience to know, Deepak is of course he just sang for us. He sings. He's a tremendous singer. He plays the veena, he plays the sarangi, he plays the sitar, he has played the guitar. He
I mean,
obviously has.
I have flirted with those instruments. I want to be known as a sarangi player and a veena player. And
Yes, and just to sort of clarify, what he says is flirting is a full-on, full-fledged affair for most of us in that particular sort of a context. He's also a polyglot. He is very fluent in Sanskrit. He is in IIT Bombay. I think you worked with you worked with Professor Ramasubramanian for
that's right.
translating Jnana Yukti Bhasha and Tantra Sangraha and those sort
That's
of
right.
things. They're amazing works. Please get your hands to them. I'll probably link those works in the description below. Uh, Now we come to a point where you have traversed through climate science, you've traversed through mathematics, you've traversed through languages and Indian classical music, both of the North Indian and South Indian kinds. You call yourself a sarangi and a veena player, and of course, being in West, you were also well neck deep in Western classical music as well. What is your third PhD about? And how did you get there?
It was funny. I mean, I have a habit of, after submitting my thesis, I'll go on a coursework spree, which is what I did after my first PhD as well. I was doing all courses in math department and here and there. So I did the same here at the University of Alberta. After I submitted thesis, I had about 6 months time before I could hear from the reviewers and to make those corrections and get my degree. So I had ample time, and I started taking courses in music theory, 1, 2, 3, 4. I had already studied harmony and counterpoint, so I got an opportunity to. I wanted to brush up some of those concepts, so I started taking those courses again. It so happened that there was a visiting professor for music theory. She came only for 2 classes. She was replacing the professor because she had I think she was otherwise busy. So she said, I'll be taking only 2 classes. And in those 2 classes, she explained the idea of counterpoint so well with the help of just one a little equation, pi slash d. I mean, I can never forget it. Perfect and imperfect intervals and anyways. uh, I thought, my gosh, I mean, what am I doing? I mean, it would be a colossal waste of my life if I don't learn Western music theory from this person. And later on, I came to know that she is one of the world-renowned music theorists. And by then, I had already written a piano suite, and I had already written a string quartet, and my album was already out.
Jazz
Uh,
Sutra, right? That was your
yeah,
album.
Sutra. It was not yet out. I mean, it was already. I think it was ready to be released, slated for release. I think in a month or two. And this actually, I I got that idea immediately, but I didn't want to not. I didn't toy around with it because it's a very dangerous idea. I mean, I'm just about to finish my second PhD. I have not even attended the graduation ceremony, and it was too premature to think about the next PhD. But somehow, this idea came to me. Yeah. Oh my God! How I wish I did a PhD with this person. And thanks to lockdown, I was contemplating and the, thinking what to do, and then I just it just loud thinking. I wrote an email to her. I mean, in the meantime, I had a couple of discussions with her over the tea, and I told her how I listen to music, and I just analyzed a couple of Western classical pieces. I analyzed a sonata, and I mean, just scatting. So I told her, I mean, this is how I would listen to this piece, and I sang all the different voices, the different lines of music. I said, this is how the oboe plays, and this is how the strings go on, and here is the ostinato, and here is this, and she was just listening to me like this all the while, and I usually get excited when I'm talking about music. I think I'm sure you would have observed it. And I just get so deep into it, and I started humming, and you know what, this is what happens, and there is this chord change, and I'm talking about all this, in air, creating those musical diagrams and paintings. And at the end of my monologue, which went for I think 10-15 minutes, she said, do you know what, this is the future of music theory. I think you should write all that you said, and you can publish this, and just run by me. I don't mind going through it for you. I mean, that immediately put me off. I said, oh no, I'm not interested. I can't write. Okay, why don't you make an audio? I said, I mean, that I can do, but the moment you want to write all this, it was very demotivating for me. But then I thought, why not? Then I wrote to her, and also there was one particular choir piece which I was discussing with her, and the way she resolved my doubt, it, I just I wanted to be her disciple. So then I wrote an email, and she was very kind. Then we met on Zoom a few times, and just to convince her that I'm a worthy disciple. So then I told her, I want to do a PhD under you. What do you think? And she looked at me like this and said, I like that idea.
Well,
That was it.
that's
And yeah.
fabulous. Is there
So now it's going to be on Western classical music theory and composition with an element of machine learning, algorithmic music composition.
Well, so this
They
so the
said that
science part,
the permanent head damage part with it
permanent
haunts
head,
me.
yes, it haunts you, but it haunts you in a good way, that at least there is an amalgamation of well, the forefront of mathematics and machine learning and algorithms with music theory. And I must say that when you were describing what happened with the oboe player at the top, I was reminded of Antonio Salieri in Amadeus. That is how he describes Mozart's music. When yeah, it's amazing. And I have taken a lot of your time, so I want to conclude, but not out of my own will or wish. It is because time is time. I want a guarantee from you that you will come again, because we want to discuss a few more theoretical fundamental ideas of music that I'm sure that many of our audiences would want to know. And hopefully the idea is to convince people that, look, classical music has to be conserved, preserved, and propagated, and it is not difficult, as you have put it.
That would be more pleasurable, than to talk about my thesis.
Absolutely. And it would be easier for me as well, because I wouldn't have to read through 300 pages of very dense scholarly material. So with the guarantee that you will come back for another talk, I would want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for this 1 hour and change that you spent with me. And
thanks very much for this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Remember we had a long chat in Amsterdam, of all the beautiful places.
Yeah. Yes, this is how permanent head damage that both of us have, that we met in Amsterdam and we did nothing but talk, whereas Amsterdam is known for a few more clandestine, I would say, things. In any case, I hope to meet you again, if not in Amsterdam, then wherever I am right now. Before we leave, I would want to also keep in my memory the great Vidwan Paramashivan, who passed away recently. It is unfortunate that it happened, but I am more than sure that he lives through you, and his repertoire, his greatness will survive because of the amazing work that you have done. I will hope to link as much as possible all the resources that were at my disposal to prepare for this talk with Deepak. And I hope all of you have enjoyed this. We will be back soon with far more theoretical, musically profound talks. I will be asking, and the profundity will all come from the other side. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you. Namaste.